right, welcome to the Am I Hunting podcast. Thank you for tuning in as always. Thank you for listening. So on this episode is going to be kind of a dive into how to deal with, or when dealing with a season that doesn't quite go your way. Last season for myself, I had a lot of close encounters with some really good bucks, just couldn't seal the deal. And to be frank, it took a lot out of me during the course of the season. So joining me on this episode is Mr. Matt Witkop. He's a friend of mine. You might recognize the last name there. He is cousins with Lee, who has been on the show as well. And Matt, he has been able to string a number of years together of having quite significant success deer hunting. And this year was one of his bigger struggle years that he's had in recent history. So here, have a sit down with him and talk about kind of the things that led to some of his success in years past, and then got into about where he struggled this last season, and then kind of what he's been doing to get over that, or find a way out of that low point of a season that just everything seems to go wrong, nothing's going right, you're just sitting there spinning your tires. But before we get into that, make sure if you like this episode, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, share this show with your friends. I love hearing about new people that have found the show, and I start seeing more and more subscribers show up. It's just so encouraging for me. And if you want to support this show more directly, head on over to mihuntingpodcast.com, where you can check out the full collection of all the content available. And if you do want to support this show more directly, head on over to the Join Us page, sign up, become a member. Your membership is $5 a month, and those memberships go towards being able to add more additional content, make upgrades to equipment to better provide more content available to you. With that membership, you'll also receive members only discounts on anything sold on the page, as well as members only content and a special gift just for signing up. So without further ado, I do want to get into this episode because we do talk for quite a bit of time. So let me not hold you up any further, and let's get into the episode. That stuff that's you're less like, I don't know about all that. What's your opinion on potentially going to a $1 state?
I don't know. I think I'm not sure where I fall on that, because I can see the benefits of one buck. I mean, basically that's all you get. Everybody's going to be more selective with what they shoot, but also at the same time, I've always grown up having 2 buck tags, and it's just one of those things where it's like you always have a backup. You don't want the fun to be over, and with the APRs, I think that's done a great job in the Northwest 13.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm just being selfish, not wanting the 1 buck.
Yeah.
Rule, but
yeah, it's I always think about it because I see how there would be a benefit to it. We would have more bucks would survive. People would maybe be more apt to shoot more does, balance the herd out a little bit. You could start probably seeing even more bucks make it to the older age class. But also, I'm at that point too. Is you bought your deer tag. How much should the state be dictating what you can shoot? Again, like you said, we've had the APRs for several years now. We're seeing the benefit, but a lot of the other state, they're still fighting it because they don't want to be told what they can and can't shoot. So it's I get it that you buy your tag, you should be able to shoot what you want. It's your tag, you harvest what you need, but I don't know. It's either way, there's going to be people not happy with it. So it's always which is the best option?
No, you can't please everyone.
Yeah.
So I mean, if it was, say we did go to this $1 tag, would it be a $1 of any, 3 inch or longer antlers, or would it still be APRs apply and a $1?
Yeah. That's a good point. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I would say, like, I think I'd rather have APRs for the state than go down to a $1. Because I think just the APRs alone, you'll see, again, more bigger deer, better balanced deer population with, a balanced age class of. Because, I mean, back in the day, how many people were killing 3 or 4 year old bucks? Not that many.
No.
A lot of 1.5 year olds, I think. What was it? Like almost 50% were 1.5 year olds, if not more. And then I think it was only I'm trying to remember the numbers that they reported on. They used to actually report on the age classes for the state of Michigan, but now they've changed they don't even do ages anymore, but it was grossly 1.5 year olds, a few 2 year olds, and even fewer anything older than that.
If it's brown, it's down.
Yep. But again, the other thing is too is you had all those deer, so if you saw a forky, that was probably going to be the big buck that you saw for the season. Or again, you let that one pass, 10 minutes later you hear a shot and the next person shot it. So
right, if I don't get them, somebody's going to get them.
Yeah. Yep. So that, I think, mindset is still kind of hard for a lot of people to grasp it. The way I look at it is that if you shoot that deer now, that's as big as he's gonna get. Maybe the neighbor gets him, but maybe not. So it's he has the potential to get bigger if that's what your goal is. But if you shoot him now, he's not gonna get any bigger.
Exactly.
So it's you take that risk that someone else is gonna shoot him. But if you shoot him now, then you already know that that's the end of it.
There's been a huge culture change too, I think. As far as the mentality, and we have APRs in this area that kind of dictate. I mean, you have to shoot something that at least meets this criteria, and then it's a double-edged sword. Everybody wanting to shoot bigger and bigger bucks, and the scores, and what did it score? And something that 20 years ago anyone would have been, proud of a little basket rack 8-point. Everyone at camp or all your buddies, they'd be congratulating you, and now that's kind of a, oh yeah, nice buck.
Yeah, that's the one downside of that, is that mindset of if someone does shoot a 1.5 year old deer, or a small 6-pointer or something like that, you get some of that, especially on the internet, of people just no, you should have let him go.
Give him another year.
Give him another year. Especially if someone that hunts in the same area, oh man, I was hoping that you go another year, or what are you doing shooting these younger deer? It's everyone has their own goal. If they're happy with that deer, if that's what got their heart pumping, if that's what they wanted to harvest, then congratulate them nonetheless. Because again, shooting does is not nearly as exciting as shooting a buck, but that's still an accomplishment. So if they're happy about it, you should be happy for them too. I don't know. I think it does seem like that mindset is backing down a little bit of kind of the buck shaming type stuff, but you can still see it's pretty prevalent. But we got into it a little bit before we started recording or anything like that. But growing up, what was your background in hunting? Did you go out with your dad or anything like that? When did you start, taking interest in hunting?
I've never met my real dad to this day. I know who he is. I've just never met the guy, never cared to. So my stepdad, he was kind of the one that I guess you could say fostered the deer hunting for me, especially with the bow. And he was a pretty successful archer. He had a lot of like 120 inch bucks, which back in the the 90s, that was
That,
you know
that's a hell of an accomplishment back then.
yeah, you were doing pretty good. So he got me into the bow hunting, and I'd go out during rifle and sit with my grandpa, so Gramps was kind of like the gun hunter, introduced me to that, and then my stepdad, he was kind of the bow guy, but I started out, small game hunting, all that when I was younger, and then 12 years old, picked up the bow, and I can't even remember if it was the first season. It may have been a season or two in before I actually killed something. I had the old Pro line. That was before cams. I just had the energy wheels on it, the little Pro line bow.
Yeah.
And then graduated. I think I had a Darton.
Yeah.
And that's where it all began.
Yeah.
So to speak.
And then, I mean, yeah, we're again roughly the same age. So you came up when they started the youth program, so you could, do the rifle part. Did you go out for rifle season there, or did you primarily stick to bow even, when you were younger?
Oh no, I any time that I can spend. I mean, I really enjoyed the gun, kind of the nostalgia of it, the deer camp feel. And then my family, they used to do a lot of drives, with rifle.
Sure.
And they were pretty good at it. I mean, some of my older cousins, they've taken some really great, specimens on deer drives. And so that was always just as exciting for me, to get the gun season in. But there's just something about, bow hunting. I think you're more in tune with the woods, because you're sitting there for hours on end.
Yep. Yeah. I feel the same way. I mean, like, growing up, I did bow hunt. I was terrible at it. Like, I had zero success. It wasn't until after I got back into hunting, well into my adult years, that I finally get my first deer with a bow. And yeah, there's something about bow hunting that, like you said, like, you're a little bit more in tune, like, because again, you have to get the deer closer. You have to be more, you just have to close the distance on more. With like a rifle, you can kind of sit, kind of that safe distance outside the deer's like kind of like bubble of where they feel secure, and you can still harvest a deer with that. So there's something about bow hunting that's the bit of the challenge is kind of the part of the fun part still with that. Now again, it's very frustrating trying to get a deer that close with the bow and not screw that up. But yeah, I agree. Bow is still my favorite to do. Which, how much you talk about it and how much I know that you go out and work, sounds like bow hunting is still probably your favorite to do.
Oh yeah, that's definitely, I'd say my passion is bow hunting. But I've taken deer within the last few years. I think a couple with muzzleloader, few gun. So I'm not just strictly bow. I mean, I'll smoke them if you got them, I guess.
Yeah, not a bow purist type of deal. Yeah.
Right.
Again, same thing. Like, I love bow hunting, but usually by time rifle comes around, like, I'm ready to get a firearm in my hand and again, have that little bit more camaraderie. Because yeah, usually bow hunting's a pretty like isolated way of hunting in most cases. It's usually just you out there. Sometimes you might have several people hunt the same property as you, but you're still by yourself quite a bit
right
during that season. So it's nice having that transition, change up your tactics a little bit. Usually at that point I'm ready for push the odds in my favor a little bit better.
reach out and touch them.
Yeah. Because I don't know how many times my dad, he started bow hunting more again too, and he's the same way. He's like, if I only had my gun, like you'd be dead 5 times over. It's like, yeah, but they're at 60 yards, and what are you gonna do?
Can you imagine how hard it was for me to convince a certain someone to come over to the dark side with the bow hunting, being such a dedicated, rifle guy, and
Yeah,
now he's like
he's all about it.
all
I know,
about
too,
it.
Yeah,
And he's kicking my butt the last couple seasons. The guy's, I'm proud of him.
yeah. It's funny. He's like, I know that you've mentored him quite a bit, but he seems like he learned a lot real quick.
Oh, he's a quick study.
Yeah,
And in the beginning, it was like I'd kind of have to, push him or prod him a little bit. Come on, man, let's go. Let's go out. And the first couple times, he's like, "My God, I can't believe how many miles you put on." And but now he's all about it. I mean, the guy's out there, putting the miles on. He's putting the work in, and he's getting the reaping what he sows.
mm-hmm. Yeah. It was funny. It was nice that he got that buck 2 years ago. That real nice buck that he got. I think it was 2 years ago.
With the bow.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that was his first ever archery.
I think so. Yeah. I was so stoked for him. Of course, everyone's like, "Who are they talking about?" He knows who we're talking about. but I mean, certainly too. I mean, you have had a run of success too. I mean, you were kind of talking about too. I know that a couple years, or was it 3 years ago, that you got the 2 bucks that you brought to the big buck night in Lake Ann.
That was 2021 season.
So like that was a heck of a season. And I was talking to you more in depth, and you're like, "Oh yeah, like I was having success years prior to that too." So you've had your run of good success too. So I guess let's talk about when you first started finding some consistent success. And I'd love to get into kind of what you think were the key factors of when you started kind of figuring it out and starting to get on more deer.
Well, I think that it's worth noting that I spent a pretty good portion of time away. I left Michigan in like 2006. I went down to the Gulf Coast and worked a lot of the Katrina rebuilding down there, and then I wound up in South Carolina, and then I got into ironwork, and I did that for a while. So I didn't really get back into the fray consistently until I think 2016.
Okay.
was when I came back here. My daughter, she was born December of that year, and that was like my first. I didn't do too much that season. I had an opportunity at a really really big deer, and I'm ashamed to say I put what I thought was a great shot on it, and we followed exhausted the searching for it, and never did find that one. But that was my first year kind of getting back into and then it just became like it always was. I mean, I was hit the ground running like I did years ago. But
Okay, I was gonna ask you, like, when you came back, if you felt like that you had lost ground of like kind of like what your knowledge was, or did you feel like there's a bit of a learning curve to get back into it?
I mean, the area was pretty much the same as it always was. I mean, there may have been like a new clear cut or block of woods that was a little different, but it was it was like riding a bike. I mean, you just get back and you get boots on the ground and get back into your old areas and see what's happening or what's not happening. I mean, some of them I just didn't see the deer that I used to, and then I find new spots, and do a lot of shining. My cousin and I, that's what was one of our favorite things to do. Like find a lot of nice bucks, shining, and then go in the next day or later that week or something, and kind of try to unpack what you think it was doing or coming from, and I had luck finding targets that way. I've Zillow listings.
Really?
Yeah, so that's another kind of an ironic, the buck that I showed you earlier, that deer, I'd seen it in someone's Zillow photos of a property that they were selling. And I was kind of interested in the property, but I'm like, I'm one morning I'm on the way to work, and I'm like, I'm gonna swing through here and just kind of check this out, and I happen to be going down the road, and I'm an eighth of a mile from where this property is, and lo and behold, at 9 o'clock in the morning, here comes that deer and two other big velvet bucks cross the road, heading for that property. So, yeah, just a note to anyone, anyone out there, just be careful what you put on Zillow. And I've actually seen some of the deer that I've been hunting in other locations in people's, Zillow pics. I'm like, oh, I got pictures of that deer. So that's where he's been.
That's funny. I have never considered seeing, because like whenever someone has like a hunting property for sale, they always have a few pictures of what deer are on the property, and I would never have thought to be like, I wonder if there's any way to hunt around there to target that deer. That is, I mean, creative, smart, but kind of a funny idea to take that as a tactic. But I can see how it could work.
It does.
I like it. That's funny. Yeah, Kim's going to be wondering what I'm doing looking at properties, and I'm scouting for deer. That's hilarious.
It's just one more thing for the bag of tricks.
I would never have thought about that. That's fun. I like that. But, oh, man. I'm going to start doing that now. That's genius. But, so I guess, like, when you got back into it, like, when you came back to Michigan, too, I mean, I know that you're kind of more targeting, older deer now. When you got back into, hunting Michigan, were you kind of just hunting for just deer, or were you still targeting older deer at that point then, too?
No, I was, when I kind of rekindled, came back home and got into, back into it, I was looking for, something where not a world record or anything like that, but I just wanted to shoot better deer than I had when I was a kid. And, and then you kind of, I think you're a product of your environment too. So like I had made connections and befriended, some guys and everybody there. You see all these deer that they're shooting. It's like, well, now you kind of feel a little pressure to, you don't want to just roll up with a 10-inch wide 6-point or something. These guys are, they're shooting these nice deer every year. So that I felt like that gave me a little more incentive and kind of a push to, to try harder, to do better and just shoot bigger deer.
Yeah. Yeah. Not necessarily that buck shaming type deal, but that little bit of peer pressure to be kind of on the same level as, the people that you're with. I get that. Like a
kind of like a friendly, what's the word I'm looking for,
not quite rivalry, but
yeah, kind of just
a little bit of competition between people. Yeah, I get that. So I mean, where you're at now, I mean, kind of what is your target buck these days?
Man, I'd say after last year, it'd be any of them that I could manage to pattern in season. I kind of have a little different approach maybe than some other people. I have a lot of historical areas that I run a lot of cameras in year after year. So a lot of these deer that I would, be having encounters with and kind of able to get on a pattern, I've watched, I've got at least a year or two, sometimes 3, 4. I've got one deer I've got like 6 years of history with. And so you kind of already are a little bit ahead of the game, knowing that what that particular deer, that okay, this time of year, like this week, he usually comes through and he'll be around for a few days, and or I know that this buck, he likes to bed over here, and so that's kind of like one of my facets of my approach. If I can, I like to try to catch up with one and try to pattern specific deer. I'm not really the kind of guy that just likes to go in blind somewhere and sit and just hopes to luck into one. Like I'm trying to find the one.
So you're looking at deer that you've had history with, that you're hoping that repeat the same pattern or pattern movement, and try to catch up with them when you think that they're ready to, or when they've hit that kind of that age class or size of rack that you're looking for.
That and then I'm a firm believer that if you can figure out where those deer are bedding is huge. Like I try to, more so than food sources, or I mean, if you don't know where those deer are living, then you could have a big area of ground that is this deer's range, but if you don't know where he's bedding, I mean, you can really kind of hone in, and if you can figure that out, I think it definitely expedites the process of trying to tighten the noose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been trying to get, like, I've never really been good at pinpointing good buck bedding. Like, I'll find areas where, like, there's definitely a buck been bedding here, but then, like, either I'm just, like, too late to the spot, or I'm just not picking the right days where they are in that area based on, like, wind or whatever the environmental or time of the year is. But I definitely see that being a benefit of trying to get closer to where, like, either their bedding areas or, like get as close as you can to that core area, because the further you get out from that, the likelihood of them encountering you becomes less and less. Like, I kind of think of it like with, like, turkey hunters. You want to get as close to that roosting spot, that way when they come down, there's less of a chance for them to pattern out and go, that area of where they could go is smaller just by getting closer to them.
Well, and mature bucks, they don't travel too far typically outside of the rut in daylight. I mean, we were talking earlier about how long they'll just stand there sometimes. I've seen deer get up from their bed and basically just mill about and until almost dark before they even start leaving that spot. Like, especially in a like a marsh situation. I've seen that just this season. I had that happen, and it was like right down to the wire, and I just couldn't get a shot. By the time that buck cleared that red brush, it was too late. I mean, I didn't really have like the greatest, but what window I had, he basically stood there until the clock ran out.
Gotcha. So I guess I'm really curious about this now. I mean, so you like to try to push into as close as you can to their bedding, or known bedding areas?
With what you can get away with.
Yeah.
I mean, because that, in some spots that may be 50 yards, and in other spots you can't get within 200 yards.
Sure. Yeah. Just depends on the area, and yeah.
Open hardwood, if they're bedded on a ridge or something where they can see access. And that's one thing that I've noticed too, that there's sometimes you see deer in places, it's like, why are they're right out in the middle of, in the wide open. I mean, what are they doing? But they can see you, and they have some sort of an advantage if they're just on the leeward side of a hill and the predominant wind is coming out of this way, and they've got the wind at their back. They can see everything below them. I mean, they may be just goats, but they're very smart goats.
Yeah, I know, because I've been trying to get better at, pushing into spots like that, but it's like, you get into some of those spots and you realize, like, that's why they're there. Like, the terrain works for them. There's usually, almost every time, especially a really good spot, there's always some form of, like, a little bit of swirl to the wind, or you got, like, elevation where, like, the thermals work in their favor, and it's just like, I don't know. There's been some spots where I'm just like, I don't know if I can get in here and hunt this without spooking them. Like, this is almost like an unhuntable spot.
Some of them you can't.
Like, so it's interesting. Like, when you start really trying to push closer to their bedding or where you think that they're bedding. Like, I've got one spot that I'm gonna try this year that, like, it's a pain to get in there. But if I can get in there and not spook them, be there before them, I think it's a great morning spot. But it's just like, if you make it all the way in there and you bust them out of there, or they smell you or something like that, that's a long way to get in there. And then who knows if they'll be back once you push into that, like, comfort zone where they're not used to that human presence. I don't know. We'll see how it works out. I don't know if my skill level is to the point where I can pull it off yet, but we're going to give it a shot.
It's hard to beat them back. You got to have everything like the perfect storm if you're gonna attempt a morning hunt. Now, you're talking like early season. You're thinking to do it
early, or even like mid-season when they start cruising a little bit more and they're coming back to their beds a little bit later.
Checking scrapes and
yeah. Because I went because I was getting pictures, basically in between that spot and food, and I noticed like they're really pushing. Like, it's getting darker and darker when they're coming through. So by the time, like, they may come through, but I know that if I get close to where they're going, then it buys me some more daylight. But so I went up there one time and bumped 2 bucks out of the spot. And then the one I knew was on his feet because I could see it walking around. I could see his legs through the brush. The other one I didn't even know was there, but it was one that I definitely got pictures of, closer to the food source. And it's like, well, I know they're up here. And this is like at like 9:30 in the morning. And they were up still. Like, the one was up moving around. So it's like, well, they're up there. But it's just like, yeah, the idea of can you beat them there once you're in there, when they're coming back, is your wind going to be good? That type of stuff. So we'll see.
Yeah, typically you're only going to get one shot in a scenario like that because they're pretty quick to catch on, and 9 times out of 10 they won't tolerate much or any intrusion into.
Yeah, well, that's what happened, I think, to me last year with that buck. That I sent you pictures of it that snuck up on me, and yeah, I mean, I saw him one other time, and he, like, the little area like this, like kind of like a bowl. He didn't come in the bowl. He stayed up on the edge, and I mean, he was 60, 70 yards from where that first time he came through, and he was up higher, and he wanted no part of coming into that bowl the second time. And then after that, I never saw him again.
Now, what time of day was that? Like, what were the thermals doing?
They were both in the morning. And the wind was basically to my face both times. And he came from the same direction, so he was traveling actually with the wind both times.
Was there any sun exposure yet, or was it still like cool enough that it was a down?
Both days it was still overcast and
downward thermal.
I don't think so. Like, I was throwing milkweed out, and the first time he didn't smell me, he saw me. Second time, I think he just didn't want to be in the area because he was uphill. Well, he was uphill from me a little bit. But he didn't spook out of there. He just, it was kind of weird because he came through with another buck, and I was just waiting for him to try to clear this tree so I could potentially get a shot at him, and he just happened to walk dead away from me behind the tree, and the other buck followed. So I don't know.
That's something that in recent years I've went way down the rabbit hole, and I pay a lot of attention to now is like wind and thermals. And I think that it's helped me a lot to understand why they are where they are and how they traverse a lot of this terrain. And I can go back through my pictures and look, and it's like, okay, every time that I see bucks in this spot in the morning, they're cross hilling, coming working from top to bottom, and it's on the the dark side of the hill or whatever. And then in the evening they'll come from the bottom and they'll head up top to go feed. And then I started thinking about, okay, well, what are, with the thermals, I mean, it makes sense. They're down in that bowl in the evening, and they wait until everything starts to fall and pull the last 30 minutes of a light. Once that sun's gone and everything switches to a downward thermal, well, they can smell everything. And if you're somewhere where a bunch of different drainages or something comes together, or like a hub,
Yeah.
then they just decide where they want to go. And
yeah, I've taken more stock into paying attention to thermals, which I don't know. Like, I actually feel more confident going into a spot in the morning, knowing that generally at some point you're going to start having those thermals pull everything up. The evenings just seem trickier because it's getting sucked down somewhere. So you got to play that almost like the terrain, knowing that your wind's or your scent's going to get sucked down, like downhill this direction instead of where you hope the deer are coming from. I don't know. I find dealing with evening thermals is way more difficult.
There's one spot that I hunt, and I know, if you were to ask Lee about it, he'd laugh, because you can almost set your watch by when these deer come through, and it's always between 8:30 and 8:45 in the morning, and it's on a east facing slope, so it's the first one to get sunlight, and it's a river bottom, so there's like a cedar swamp and then river bottom below, and these deer, they're side hilling on that hill, and typically the wind would be out of the west there, so they've got the wind coming over the hill, and then the thermals are pulling everything up, and that's right at that time frame, that window. I mean, you can literally set your watch by it.
Yeah. Yep. And they're walking right through there. They can smell everything above them and below them. Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing how. And then, like, it's one of those things. Like, how do you beat that though? It's so tough to try to when they've got all the cards stacked in their favor.
You just set up in a big tall hemlock that's right on the edge of the hill with a creek behind you, and use the water to help pull some
of it down. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, like you said, when you start dealing with thermals, you gotta get creative of like how high in the tree, use that hillside or water to try to pull that scent a different direction a little bit. So now that I'm super interested in this, do you like when you're looking at that, do you play a lot of like the trying to get like a crosswind, or like how close to like a bad wind or a bad thermal do you push a situation or a spot?
Whatever I can get away with.
As much as you can.
The more that it's in their favor, the more likelihood
they're
gonna feel comfortable.
Yep. Yeah, I started playing around with that too, like, because usually it was like when you start thinking about the wind, like, okay, wind in my face every time. It's like, well, but then it's not a good wind for the deer. So yeah, you start pushing like that crosswind or like just off that trail. That prevailing wind is like, if it swirls a little bit, maybe they'll catch you. But if it stays consistent, Yeah. It's I don't know. Again, I'm still learning that part and dissecting it again. And problem is too is every spot's a little bit different. Like you can kind of have a general, idea of how the thermal is going to operate, you know, over the landscape, but then certain terrain features or the way the trees are, the type of trees, play into it too. It's
Oh
like,
yeah.
golly, like
You have to spend time in each of them
yeah,
spots to kind of
yeah,
figure out how they work.
yeah. You almost have to hunt it, and then just be checking, with like a scent or wind checker or milkweed or something like just to see what happens. Like every like 20, 30 minutes, just making sure that those is acting the way it's supposed to or what you think it's going to do.
Oh, I'm sure that I've probably single-handedly helped spread monarch butterfly habitat all across northern Michigan. I mean, I round up whenever later in the year, when the milkweed pods open up and they dry out.
Yeah.
I'm just stuffing Ziploc bags full of it. I mean, I keep it in my truck. I'll just randomly like pull some out of one of my coats. Oh, here's the thing of milkweed. But the whole time I'm in the tree, and you got to get it just right. You can't, if you get too big of a tuft, it'll just want to, just fall down, but you got to get the little,
Yep.
just barely a few little strands and then let it do its thing. And
Yep. Yeah, I remember, I don't know if it was last year, year before, hunted a spot, and I was like, all right, prevailing winds, great. It's all going downhill, perfect. But it was just like, I threw out milkweed, and it's like, yep, there it goes, perfect. Like 5 minutes later, I see milkweed
Coming
coming
back.
back up the hill. I'm like, what in the
Yeah.
world? Just like, there's no, like, everything knows I'm in here now. Like, there's nothing that's going to be in here that doesn't know I'm here. It's just like, so much for that. Like, so I just moved and started just scouting or, like, just still hunting at that point. It's like, nope, not a good spot. Yeah. All right. So what I'd like to actually do is two things. I'd like to have you tell your story from the 2022 season again with your 2 bucks. And I'd like to then go from, kind of that high that you had that season into kind of the struggles that you had for this season or the 2023 season.
sure.
So go ahead and tell the story about, again, you don't have to get too much in detail, but just kind of recap those 2 hunts, and then we'll get into last year.
Yeah. So that was actually 21 was the anomaly
Okay.
season. That's when it was just crazy. But I'd had some good success. I tagged out, I think, 2 seasons prior. So that was my third year tagging out. But 2021, I have never spent as much time before, during, and after season in the woods scouting. I mean, to the point where maybe I probably spent a little too much time in the woods. But what was so neat about that, and I now, looking back, it's like, well, it really makes sense. I spent all that time scouting, but most of my experiences were like first sit after, our particular deer, because I actually had I wound up getting two pretty good bucks. I had hit one of my longtime targets. I had first sit again in that spot, and I wound up got him right in the ball of his shoulder, and I had I had 2 other encounters with that deer that season, and then I had pictures of him afterward. He's still alive. I mean, I just
Really?
I just
Okay.
saw him this year. So 3 pretty decent deer, all first set but whatever seat time that I guess that I didn't have, it was all spent scouting.
Gotcha.
And I'd say that's probably, that's what killed those deer.
Now, with that scouting that you're doing, was that exploring new areas, or was that trying to dissect that those spots that you already knew that some deer were? Maybe just expanding those searches a little bit more and kind of piecing that a little bit more, or were you scouting more just kind of new areas?
Well, I'm always, looking for the next place to just, something to file away in the Rolodex for new ground or, new deer. But I always make it a point to go back into these same spots, year after year, and at least, run a few cams in the same places to kind of keep track of what's going on there. And the deer that I shot on opening day of season, a bow that year, it's an area that I'd been hunting for 17 or 18 years at that time. But that was the first year that I had permission to hunt the property where all the deer bedded, which was like a 40-acre, clear cut, but they left a bunch of big mature white oaks, and there's a swamp on one side of it, and it's got a big ridge. It's like paradise.
Gotcha.
And I first year in having permission in there, of course, I went in and did the walkthrough, and I actually kicked that deer out of his bed. And then I went and I walked up there, and I'm looking, I'm like, oh, well, yeah, this is where he beds at least some of the time. And that was my plan, opening afternoon on that sit. I had, the wind was right, and I got in early. I mean, I don't think it got dark till probably like 7:30, 7:40, something back, early October.
Yeah.
And I just remember how hot it was. It was like 70 degrees, and I had mosquitoes. I had my face mask on, but they're all over my nose, the bridge of my nose and my eyelids, and I'm trying not, you just move your hand up, and I just kind of kept it there the whole afternoon. And 7 o'clock, the deer started moving, and then I saw him get up from that bed, and he went right down the transition until he got almost downwind of me. And I had he was going to come through I call it the intersection. There's a couple of logging roads that they all come to right there. And I got to him just before he got my wind. And so that was, that one. And then the one that I hit and I didn't get, again, I went in and I just put a lot of boots on the ground, and I found, where all these deer were bedding, and it was a real sketchy wind, and I hadn't been in that spot. I shot the deer on the opener, and then my next sit was October 30th. So I went a whole month without going back in the woods. I went in there on that off wind, 5:30 in the afternoon. This buck is up, moving around and bedding, and he just came right to me on a rope 18 yards. And I mean, another inch and it'd be a different story. But that was a first set. And then the 8-point that I wound up taking in late season with the bow, that was kind of a different scenario than what I usually. I had no prior history with this deer. It was just it was actually on the state land that's behind my stepdad's house, and it's a vast swamp area, And I had sat there earlier trying to kill some does, I think earlier in the week, and somehow, somewhere along the line, my rangefinder came up missing. And it was kind of mild, that week, but we had snow coming, and there's only two places that I'd set. So I'm like, well, it's got to be there or it's in this other spot. So just on a whim, I'm like, hey, I'm gonna go, out back and look for my rangefinder, and I'm just gonna grab the bow and go sit the last, hour or whatever. And I backtracked my tracks. I never did find the rangefinder, but what I did find was a big set of, buck tracks from that morning that were headed back to the swamp. And I'm like, all right, well, I back trailed it, and it was pin drop quiet. And so I got as close as I dared to where that transition was, and I just parked it under a hemlock tree on the ground on my knees. And it was like 10 minutes before dark, all hell broke loose. This is like December 13th. And there's bucks. I hear antlers clashing. I mean, they're going at it back where the tracks led. And then I hear deer running through the snow, and a doe came out, and then this guy was right behind her, and I was able to contort myself into a offhanded shot and put a good shot on him. And that, so it was a lot of luck of being in the right place at the right time. But I knew that area because I grew up there. I knew how that worked, and I knew if there was a set of tracks going in, that they were probably going to come back out, that evening. And I mean, I'd rather be lucky than good. So
right, yeah, you take it, right? Yeah. So that's pretty cool that you actually caught that. So that was probably like some, do you think that maybe that doe was in heat and he was going after the breeder?
I'm sure that and that deer, I don't know if that buck would have made the winter because he had no fat on him.
Oh, really?
I mean, and he was like run down. I don't know how old he really was. I'm guessing it probably at least 3.5, maybe 4.5. But I question, I think he was just still, so caught up with the rut, and I don't know if he would have been able to eat enough and, build back his reserves for the winter. So
yeah, it is interesting, especially like you get like bucks that you have history with, seeing them after the rut. Some of them look pretty darn rough. It's amazing how much weight they can look like they dropped. And like you said, if he didn't have any fat on them, it's questionable.
None.
Yeah.
None. I've never seen anything like it.
Just super lean, huh? All right. So let's get into kind of the main reason why I wanted to have you come on this year, because I guess we'll get to kind of the punchline. This is the first year in a while for you that you didn't harvest a buck. I didn't harvest one this year either, despite my multiple, opportunities at it. I just kept botching it one way or the other. But so with that being said, I mean, going into last season, I mean, what was your outlook? What was kind of the intel going into the season? Did you have any high hopes? Did you have any target bucks that you were kind of on your radar? What did the season look like going into it?
Well, ahead of season, I actually did manage to find a little bit of time to get some cameras out in some of these spots, and it was kind of slow, intel coming in, and I never really got like the buck, this year. There was one. He had been a 10 point, I think, for 3 seasons before, in one of my spots, and I had him, in the same bed. This is the same location that I got the big deer on the opener in 21, actually. And I had him fairly regularly, in velvet, rolling through that spot, and then he kind of just he'd show less and less, and I think the last I saw of him, it was like October 18th. I never got any more pics after. I don't know. He's probably took a ride home with somebody. I had one really, really nice buck that was in a new spot, kind of new spot. The first time I'd ever hunted that area was the year prior, and I had a lot of nice deer on camera. I just was never able to catch up with them when I would make a sit. And this ties into the Zillow thing earlier, where I had noticed that there was a property for sale that was within 3/4 of a mile of where I'd already been hunting. And I got looking at the pictures, and there was one that just jumped out at me, and I'm like, man, why that deer looks so familiar? And I'm like, so I go back and I'm in my phone and I'm looking, and I had velvet pics of that deer the year before, which would have been, same year probably as that Zillow picture, in the clear cut that was 3/4 of a mile to the south. But this guy's got, pictures of him, excuse me, to the north. And I'm like, well, there's more state land there. So I'm going to check out this next clear cut. And I managed to find a little bit of time to sneak out and did like a ninja scout. And I came across some great sign, big trail intersection with some scrapes at the bottom of a hub in a clear cut, and threw a camera up. And I did get on one really good buck. And I think I got a couple other pictures of it, but I sat there, oh man, probably 4 or 5 times at various parts of the season. And I never, I had a couple does come through, never saw him, never saw any other bucks. I had opportunities. I passed a lot of smaller bucks. I had opportunities. I had, near misses, and then I had one that was just my own stupidity with I forgot about my pin being dialed at the wrong yardage, and, put a bad shot on one in the leg. God, I sound like I'm just out here shooting up all these deer. I need to go back to the range, but that was probably the difference in that just being another good, season. Like, hey, I grounded out, but I wound up coming out on top versus I just it's like it never got off the ground.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I mean, I don't know. I mean, did you have any big takeaways from the season? I mean, was there anything that you're just like if you had to give the season overall rating, or was there any big lesson that you learned out of it, or was it just kind of it just never seemed to you're just kind of spinning your wheels, I guess?
A little bit of everything. I mean, I feel like that I definitely could have spent a lot more time scouting if I had, the time to dedicate to it. And I'm sure that would have helped. But it did seem to me like I just didn't see the numbers of deer, even in the traditional spots where I run a few cameras, in this block or in this block. And I just wasn't seeing the deer. And, that permission piece that I told you about, that this was the first year that I was allowed to gun hunt it.
Okay.
So I kind of like went all in on that for, for that block of time. And I had one time that I shouldered and I looked at one, but he just wasn't quite, he was a little smaller, didn't really have the mass. I figured he's probably like a 2.5-year-old, and I let him go. But typically on that property even in that area, it's not uncommon to see, several bucks, 3, sometimes 4 or 5 bucks in a night, like decent quality deer. I mean, and it was like a ghost town this year.
Any thoughts or theories as to why that changed, or why they just weren't there this year?
I don't know. I'd like to find out.
Yeah.
I don't know if I think that there may have been some neighbors that had their property cut the year prior, so I don't know if it's maybe a new, clear cut or something's coming up, and they're, because the one that I'm in is, probably in about that 7 or 8-year-old range, where there's still browse, but it's not that, the tender little shoots like in the first year or two.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, maybe that, attributed to some of that. But then as far as the other spots, it seems like I was seeing more people than deer.
Yeah, we discussed that a little bit before we started, that it just seemed like no matter where you went, there were other hunters that you were encountering. And we talked about, the different reasons why that could be and whatnot. So, yeah, it's interesting being able to navigate, other hunter pressure. Then, again, you got to get more creative then if you still want to try to hunt a spot, but yet work around them. Because a lot of times we discussed it, that they're picking the exact same spot. You were telling me that you walked in, quite a ways into this swamp, started climbing a tree, and realized that someone else had, their climbing sticks on that same tree. And then you start looking around and realize there's a trail camera, and again, a spot that you worked pretty hard to get back to, and sure enough, there's someone else that's already set up there, had their equipment there at one time.
Oh yeah, you're not gonna find somewhere that someone hasn't raised their flag, at some point. I mean, and that's one thing I think with our state, we have a lot of public land, and big tracts of land, but we're also we have one of the most I'm not sure how you'd word it, but like our trail systems and our roads, you're hard pressed to be more than a mile from a road or a trail or some form of access that makes it easier for individuals to get in.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes it feels like you people talk about, hey, I get to the back of the property. Some of these spots, there is no back of the property because there's a road or a logging road or a trail or hiking road or something
Right.
like that. So, yeah, I get that too. Like, there's a lot of times where it's like, yeah, like to get into deep, you go into the center of the piece. That's where you get the furthest away from roads or access.
And sometimes the you might be walking past deer to get to where you think that the deer are, and they're right there next to the road or the parking area watching.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Watching people's access. And yeah, it's I'm going to try harder to get away from people, but there's only so much that you can do. I know one spot that I've hunted for a long time, and there's a lot of big deer there. It's more of an ag area than some of the other. I hunt like a lot of big woods, clear cuts, some swamps, and then this is kind of probably would be the most like agricultural based like type area. And there's a lot of guys that hunt there, and there's probably there's probably 3 other people that I know of that hunt this particular chunk, but the 2 guys come up on the weekend, so they'll be there from like Thursday or Friday, and then they'll leave. Sometimes they'll sit Sunday morning, and they'll go back down to Muskegon, Sunday. So I learned to try to get my hunts in like during the week.
Sure.
When there's not these guys that, so some spots, like I try to, you almost want to try to figure out where the people are and when they're coming and going, and then just slip in, case in point, the near success that I had if I just would have had my pin right. That was right in between, people. I mean, it wasn't like a couple days before I had a guy walk through there, and then I went out and sat and had that encounter, and it's the same spot that I told you that I had my camera, and then the other guy set his camera up like 5 yards on a tree. So I think that's, and the deer know, they know when kind of their people's routines and patterns, and so that's something that I'm, trying to figure out how to navigate that better.
Yeah, which is always tough because, again, I mean, like the same thing. Like you can deal with one type of hunter, or someone that comes in the same spot as you, and then you're like, okay, kind of figure that out, and then next thing you know, here comes another person, or they move or something like that, and it's like, all right, like, yeah, you gotta try to find that give and take of working around other hunters, trying to be respectful, but yeah, still try to hunt the spots that you want to. It can be a juggling act, because like I know, like most of the spots I'm at, I usually don't run into too many like hunters during the bow season, but you start getting into like usually around like 1st November, the foot traffic, the number of people scouting, setting up for getting ready for rifle season. There's a few people that like they bring their camper up, they'll hunt that first 2 weeks of November, and then they'll stay there through rifle season. So it's usually I don't run into too much early in October, but then I know like, okay, it's time to get out of here as we get into the rut. It's just time to go because these spots, they're going to be overrun. So with with that being said, with dealing with the other hunters and whatnot, was there were you trying to make a lot of in-season adjustments, trying to change up your game plan? What was kind of your mindset of trying to work your way through that?
I didn't really have the opportunity to do too much as far as strategies, and so like I said earlier, I managed to get a lot of sits in this year, but I was never really hunting a deer or like a target deer. I felt like I was hunting spots, and I would just get out when I could get out, and that may not be like the best time, or if I actually managed to get a picture or something in the morning, maybe I'd only be able to sit in evening. So I felt like I was kind of, it's like throwing spaghetti at the wall, to see if something will stick. And I still managed to put myself, in the game a couple times, certainly with a lot of smaller bucks, but it was a very abnormal year for me. I just, from working, with my work schedule, I wasn't really able to put the kind of time in to, especially in season, to get out there and, okay, well, they're not here, but let me wander around this 20 acres and see, maybe I'm missing something. I didn't really have the ability to do that. Gotcha. This year. And
so just the time restraint just didn't allow for really make any, educational or educated like switches to what you already kind of knew going into the season. You just kind of had to stick with what your intel was and what your gut was saying from years past, then, huh?
Pretty much. And I did have a little stretch right at the end of archery where I kind of work slowed down enough that I was able to get out, move some cameras around, do some sky. And I went back to an old, someplace that I grew up. I spent a lot of time hunting when I was younger. So I kind of had an understanding of, how things work there, but maybe not exactly what the deer were doing. And I did kind of that last, week, I went really hard at it, and I managed to, have an encounter with a buck that I just wasn't able to, to get the shot. But that kind of felt for that little blip at the end of season. That was I felt like I kind of was, getting with it. It's like I just needed a few more days or another week, and, something could have happened. But
So finally starting to feel like you're in the game a little bit then.
a little bit. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. And then, so the other thing, I mean, again, it's not necessarily like tactics wise, of a topic, but, especially when you have had a track record of success, you kind of have patterns of, seeing deer and kind of the normal, game plan. When that goes awry and things don't go right, like it can take a toll on you, mentally. I know for me, I had a lot of ups and downs where, like, kind of like that high of, like, probably had the opportunity of the biggest buck I've ever, had a chance to on public land. Like, game plan wise, it was perfect. Like, the buck did exactly, like, he came in that morning after catching him on trail camera 2 days prior, and he came through the spot that I wanted to. The time frame was right, and I just buggered it up. So I was, like, stoked that it worked out, but devastated that I blew it. So, and then it was just kind of that same thing all season long. It was a lot of, like, I basically summed up my season as basically like a close but no cigar type of deal. Like, had plenty of opportunities, but in some way I messed it up, and it tore me up mentally. So I did want to talk to you a little bit about kind of like how you dealt with some of that, kind of that letdown or like the discouragement or frustration of going through the season, especially having had especially a track record of, being able to find success, and then going through a season where nothing seemed to really go right. So I guess I'm not really sure how to really get into it, but I mean, kind of like looking back, what was kind of your mindset of how you're dealing with some of those setbacks, and, like, were you able to try to stay positive, or were you starting to feel like, this kind of hopeless, or what was your mindset going through the season?
It definitely wears on you, and I guess that's where it's humbling too, because you kind of get into a rhythm. It's like going down the interstate at 70 miles an hour, on a nice straight road. Everything's clicking along, and I've been fortunate to have some pretty good years, and but this year for sure, it definitely got the better of me. It was discouraging. I mean, there was, times, but I'd get a little testy or something, and my other half would have to, put me in my place, and, oh God, I just can't wait until this is all over, type of deal. And then I was also looking forward. I'm like, well, hunting season, that really, that stunk, but there's always ice fishing. And we all know how that turned out this year. So, it's like, wow, going forward, I definitely need to do a lot more homework, and I'd really like to get on something, to try to find something and pattern it and get back into that rhythm, because I just felt lost this year. I never really was in the game. I don't feel.
Yeah. Did you ever feel like you're kind of going through like a little bit of like self doubt of like, kind of like maybe not necessarily like your skill or like just like feeling like you'd have no what direction to go? Or were you just kind of sticking to your gun of like, no, I know this is the process. If I just stick to what I know, stick to my guns.
Well, my one of my big hang-ups that I would beat myself up over is it's like I've got only certain windows or whatever that I can make it out, and I would be like, well, am I making the right call? If I go here, and I sit here, should I be over there? And I never really was getting pictures, from any spot that would make me think that, oh, I should have been there clearly, but there was a lot of times where I'm like, man, I wonder if am I beating this spot up? Am I missing something? Should I know that this is a area that historically they bed in, and I'm trying to, hunt the exits, but should I be hunting a travel, should I back off, or should I look for foods? I mean, there's a million things that run through my mind, and every night, I'm laying there in bed and the illuminated screen, Onyx and Spartan Forge, and I'm like, in and out of LiDAR and topography, and I'm looking here and I'm looking there, looking at Zillow, trying to find some new, new targets.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, like, sounds like it too, that, like, I've dealt with it too, of, like, you just don't really have the good intel, but you're like, well, this is the opportunity that I've got, anything can happen, so you go out, but you don't have confidence. Like, you're just like, yeah, maybe, but, like, you're in the back of your mind, you're like, it's probably not going to happen tonight. The conditions aren't right. Like, this isn't really the spot I want to be in. I'm not getting camera intel. Like, there's a good likelihood I'm not going to see anything. And then you make it through the night, and you're like, yeah, that was a waste of time. Like, I could have been doing something else. Like, and then, like, I know, like, having multiple sits of that, like, it can wear at you. Like, you're just like, what's the point? Like, it's tough to stay motivated to keep digging and trying to, analyze or try to better your situation.
And you just mentioned something too that I want to try to get better about going forward, as they're a valuable tool, cameras, and I utilize them a lot, but I think that I'm too dependent on whether or not I have like a particular deer or multiple bucks, or showing up. If I happen to see one once, then I need to get out there and start moving around, and if I time allows. But I've sat there, I don't know how many times, especially this year, I've sat there next to my cameras and watch deer walk by and never once had a picture. So I know that they're not always catching what's going on in the woods, and I tell my cousin this all the time, that camera's only seeing just a little window of the entire woods. It's just looking at that little 20-foot wide. I'm not sure what the trajectory and like their detection range and all that, but it's not a very big swath.
Yep.
It's just looking at that little tiny, and I hang my cameras high to try to, for scent and to not alert the deer. But I feel like there's a lot of times that they still know it's there, and if a deer knows the cameras, especially a buck, he's probably gonna, skirt around it. And
Yeah, which I don't even necessarily think it really even has to be all that. I hunted a spot where I hunt a camera, and it was like right on a scrape. Funnels down in a little valley, main trail, big old rub line through it. Like this is the vast majority of the travel, which the camera showed that, but like 20 yards behind my camera, there's another trail that I would see repeatedly. Deer, just whatever reason, decided to take this, you know, less common trail instead of going in the front, on the main one. They just, for whatever reason, skirted off to the side, and it was like it would be does, younger deer and stuff like that. So, like I don't know if necessarily they, picked up on the presence of the camera or knew something was up, and that's why they were skirting it, or if it was just that they just happened to be they wanted that trail that day. Like I don't know.
Well, that's something I feel like for going forward for me with the cameras, I'm still going to utilize them and, to try to verify that there's something that I want to chase there. But at that point, I need to rely more on my gut and my instincts and start, crossing off, spots and setting my way and trying to hone in on these deer and just trust that they're there.
Yeah.
Because I've become a little too dependent on well, if I don't have this buck, 3 times a week, then I'm not going to go in there. I don't want to blow my opportunity. Well, no, if you see him and he's probably going to be around somewhere, just get out there and figure it out.
Yeah, and there's something to be said too, especially like if you're trying to learn a spot. Those cameras are great. They're great at, especially either like the cell cameras are really good about giving you that like instant like intel. But I still like to use cameras just as like a body of work throughout the season. Learn the kind of the trend, but there's something to be said that you're not going to learn as much from the cameras as when you're actually sitting there. Like you said, you can see where deer are traveling outside of that window of what the camera can. You can learn thermals. You can understand like, oh, they're browsing on this over here, or this white oak's dropping acorns here, and that's why they're getting pulled one way or the other. You just can't learn that from the cameras. So same thing. Like a lot of times you're just like, well, the camera's not really showing me that, but like I usually look at the weather too and it's like this spot makes sense. Even though I don't have the intel, this is the best spot that seems to make the most sense based on the time of year, whatever intel I'm dealing with, and I'll go sit it. Again, usually I run into a hard time of like like at least in the years past, I'd have a hard time of like, yeah, I made the wrong call. I didn't see anything, or I didn't see the deer I wanted to, so I made the wrong call. You made the best choice that you could with the intel that you had, and that's the choice you made. Like, was it the wrong answer? No, not necessarily. Not with the intel that you had. It's like, I don't know, kind of the idea of like deer are deer. They're going to be unpredictable sometimes. Like, even if you have the best intel in the world, and like everything tells you like a deer can do things 9 times out of 10, but that one time they just decide to do something different. So it's, I don't know, it's like a lot of times I try not to like get caught up in like, I don't know how I want to say this, like not necessarily the paralysis by analysis, but like just because it didn't pan out how you predicted it doesn't mean that you still weren't on the right track, I guess.
Oh yeah, that deer may have been 60 yards in the brush from you, and you never saw him.
Yeah. All right. So, I mean, we covered kind of, how your season went. We talked about a little bit before when you first got here, kind of what your plan is for this season to improve your situation. You said you're going to try to do a lot more scouting this year, at least, try to get a good, maybe a target buck or, a buck that catches your eye that you can kind of hone in on. Is there anything else that you're thinking that you're going to try to do differently this year, or just to improve your odds for this coming season?
Man, I feel like as far as my approach and my equipment and everything. Like I can't get much more refined. I mean, you happen to be with me when I made my the biggest purchase ever and stepped away from my starter sticks and stand and so as far as like my equipment, I got the new bow, new arrow set up, the best mobile setup that I could ever ask for, like, and my packing in and out and all that. I feel like I've got that down to a T. Like I feel really confident about my setup and getting in and out. I need to find something to go after and then make it come to fruition instead of just spraying and praying, just getting out and getting in the woods somewhere just to sit and hope that something's going to come through.
Yeah. So I guess, I mean, if you had to say overall what the big game plan is it just, it sounds like mostly just try to scout more and just find what you're looking for essentially?
Yeah, I mean, even if it's tracks or something, at this point, I mean, and Mr. Infall says it best when he says scout, 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 hunt, and it really, you could luck your way into a couple deer, but I know for me personally that the years that I'm able to put more time into it, be it boots on the ground or shining, that was a big thing in my bag of tricks too. And, my cousin and I used to do quite a bit of that. And you'd see if we'd get out early enough, like within an hour or so of darkness, these deer aren't too far away from wherever they're coming from, so if you'd see a good buck, like I said, you can come back a few days later whenever you got time to get in there and start investigating and like, oh, okay, well, he came into the field from over here. And that was another useful tool that I didn't do any. I mean, maybe we went like 2 or 3 times this whole season, and I feel like that's something I need to do more of. Even if it's throw the kid in the truck and like, hey, we're going for a ride.
Yeah, this is what we're doing tonight, huh? Yeah. I don't know. For me, it's a lot of. I talked about this before on the show and whatnot. It's a lot of just try to refine kind of what I already know. Again, I had great success of being able to find deer. Now, is that going to translate into this year? Time will tell. But my thing is just trying to refine the, I guess, the execution. So this year was really the first year I really felt like I was targeting older deer or older bucks, and they just seemed to have that experience of being on their own and just had that sense of like something's not right. They don't make the mistakes of like the younger deer do that I've had more encounters with or more experience with, and it's just little things like making sure you pick a tree that maybe may not have the amount of like shot opportunities that you're looking for, may not have a wide range of nice shooting lane, but maybe has one that like has a little bit of branch cover that can hide your movement a little bit better. Little stuff like that. And again, we talked about it, being able to manage, your scent, play those thermals a little bit better, not make those mistakes, getting in the area and all of a sudden like, oh great, my scent is being pulled right down to where I think they're coming from. Like being able to fine tune that execution part in the stand is my big thing for this year anyways. So, I guess, is there anything else that we didn't really cover? I know you had some notes. Is there anything else that we didn't cover that you wanted to touch base on or think that it's important to discuss?
I think that I need to get myself acquainted more with this new bow I have too. I definitely need to spend some more time shooting this year. That was one thing that I didn't do enough of either. And one of my friends, he just put in, I think maybe it was one of these local shops. He bought one of their old techno screens
Oh.
and his, so he's got that in his barn. Now he has an indoor.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm gonna, take him up and get in there and, shoot with those guys. And of course they all do the league up at Gothiers. And I don't know that I'm going to be doing that, but I mean, if it's a matter of getting out on the weekends and definitely shooting more at the house and, cause this was a new setup for me this year, new arrows, different fletch, and, still shooting the same broadheads, but I need to do my diligence and definitely spend some more time, flinging arrows in the off season.
Sure. Do you think that's something that's like, just like trying to know, like, that like pin gap or, how that arrow reacts when you're 2-3 yards past where you set your pin or?
I shoot a single pin slider.
Yeah.
And I know that I'm good for, 3 to 5 yards depending on where I'm at. And I'm really good typically about when I get into a tree or if I've sat there before, I know, but I'll range, landmarks. I know that, okay, that big tree over there, that's 37 yards or, this is 25 yards. And that I just got caught up in the moment when that happened earlier this season, and I had already ranged. I knew that when those deer hit that logging trail, that was 27 yards, and I had my pin set for 27 yards, and he got to within probably like 30, and I don't know why he took a little different track than the doe. He was about 30 yards to the north of where she came down the hill. And it was just enough. And I like to hunt these sketchy winds. It was just enough that he got just a whiff of I'm drawn, waiting for him to come down because he's coming right down to me. And he got within a few yards and he just spun around, took 2 bounds and was out at about 37, I think, is where I ranged it after I'd shot, and I forgot that pin was still 27, and I just watched that arrow drop not into where it was supposed to go.
Yeah. Yeah, that's rough. Well, actually, that buck, I had an opportunity to him that same bow season, and again, deer do the weirdest thing. I know I've talked about this before. This deer crossed a 260-yard open field, lackadaisy, feeding as he went. My dad was actually watching that field, just calm as could be. Took his time. As soon as he hit the wood line, like proceeded to like start trotting and running. And I'm like, I saw him like at the edge of the field. He's just walking. I'm like, cool. As soon as he made it into the woods, he's started trotting. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So like, of course, like I just barely get my bow in my hand. By the time I swing around, he's already passed. So I had to spin around the other side of the tree. And then, of course, kind of had the area ranged out, at least I thought pretty well. Finally got him to stop, got drawn on him, thinking he was at 35 yards. So I'm holding for 35, let it go, and that arrow went exactly where my pin was holding, right on top of his back. So I figured like, oh, okay, my pin's this is a 30-yard pin. I'm aiming for 35. It's going to drop right into where it needs to be. And it went beeline right where my pin was holding, right over his back. He was at 30, not 35. So my holdover, that arrow went exactly at 30 yards.
Just lasered in there.
Yeah, and as soon as I let that arrow go, I could see the trajectory of it lined right up where I was putting my pin, and I knew before it even went over his back that I'd shot over him. It was just immediately just like, nope, that's exactly where that arrow's going. And it was the same thing. It's just like that extra second, half second to be able to, assess the situation just a little bit better and make your adjustment. But then I got hosed last year. It's being, hypersensitive to that. This deer was coming in, like, every time he'd, like, take a couple steps, like, range, redial, range, redial. And some spike horn busted me in the tree, making my adjustments. He spooks, and then the other one followed. It's like trying to do the right thing, and then I still buggered it up.
I forgot to mention to you, too, that I also missed a really nice tight racked 8-point at like 5 yards.
No.
Yeah. I may have forgot to mention
You
that.
did.
So that was a situation where I was so worried about my bow. Here I've got this new to me bow, that's most expensive bow I've ever had. And the tree that I'm sitting in, there was a limb that came out from the trunk. It was a beech, and where he came, there was an apple tree that had like kind of like a little scrape under it, and there was like a few apples that were on the ground. And I heard him, he came down off of the ridge and in the leaves, and then he kind of hung up and like burned a lot of time off the clock. And then he come in, so he's like coming quartered to me, and I'm completely turned around in the tree. So I'm right-handed. The trunk of the tree is like right here in this limb. All I could think about was my bottom cam and the limb of my bow. I'm like, I don't want to grenade this brand new bow. And he just needed to take a couple more steps. And time's running out. Like I'm getting down to it's like getting to be the last few minutes, and so I'm like looking more at my limb on my bow than I am at this deer. And he finally he needed to take like 2 steps. I got impatient. I let him take like 1.5, and I pulled my shot. I know the second that I let go, I jerked my bow away because I was so deathly afraid of hitting that limb, and I just shot right underneath him in the dirt at 5 yards.
Oh.
So yeah, I mean, to say that I didn't have opportunities, that would be a lie, but it was just never with that, the special bucks that you're trying to get on. But I was my own worst enemy this year.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, let's see. Well, potentially 4 bucks potentially had shot opportunities at, and it got messed up one way or the other. So I had the one at my cousin's place. This buck, again, thinking I'm, being smart and planned it out perfectly. This buck came down at an angle, coming down this hill. It's like, all right, he's gonna take this extra step. He's gonna turn broadside. So as he went to go step, I started drawing. He caught my movement, stopped in his tracks, looked right at me, facing straight at me at like 30 yards. I'm like, I've taken a front on shot at a deer before, but not when they had me
alert,
dead to rights.
Yeah.
So it's just like, well, maybe he turns and I can still shoot him. Nope, this deer again did the quick whip around straight up the hill. It's just like, but thinking like, all right, like I saw him coming down nice and calm. Just like, all right, he's going to take that one step as I'm drawing. He's going to be none the wiser and just Yeah, like you're thinking that you're planned ahead and like making the right call, and then they catch you. It's like, God.
And they can change their location in a hurry. I had that almost the same thing happen this year. Same within 25 yards of where the mist happened. In the morning, I had this little like 6-point. He came out, so I'm on to kind of lay it out. Like I'm on a side hill. There's like a spine that drops down from up top, and it's kind of sparse field. There's some trees. And I'm in a dead. I think it was like a locust tree or something. And that there's that little apple tree. Like I could just see it, over the crest of this hill, and I'm to the hills like 18 yards, and to the tree is probably 25. I can't shoot the tree because of the terrain, but so I see this little buck comes out, and he went over the hill, and then I seen him coming back. Well, I saw a bigger rack behind him thrashing up in the limb of that apple tree. And so I'm like ready, and the little deer is walking. Now he's coming back my direction. He's looking, he has no idea that I'm there, the smaller buck. And ideally I would have been drawn and waited for that big one to come over and crest that ridge and then either go one way or the other, kind of like what you just mentioned. And no, as soon as that little guy got out of frame, now I'm just left with my bow at the ready, but not drawn. That buck, the second he came up and crested that rise, he spotted me, and in a split second, he just did a 180 and like 3 bounds was, out at like 40 yards, stopped blowing, and
yeah. Yeah, I had one, this was 7 years ago. He was a 2-year-old buck, like, not the brightest deer out there yet. And, like, followed all these other deer walking perpendicular in front of me. He comes through. I'm like, perfect. He's going to come through, shooting lane. He's going to step out from behind this pine tree, broadside perfectly. He steps out, and as I'm drawing as he's stepping, by the time I settle on my pin, he had stepped out and turned down this other trail, facing directly at me again. So I'm at full draw again. And I'm just like, and this was several years ago before I had the confidence to even try to take a straight on shot. And so I'm like, well, I'll just wait. He's got to turn one way or the other. What does he do? He looked back behind his shoulder. One fluid motion, turned right around, started walking directly away from me again. It's like he was coming in this direction. Then he turns face me, and he turned did a 180. And he didn't spook. He wasn't on edge. I'm just like, why? Why did this deer change direction 2 different times and not present a shot? Like, I don't know.
If you can figure out why they do what they do, you could probably make a lot of money.
Probably. Yeah, and have a lot more deer on the wall for sure. But I did want to ask you too, how did you like your bee sticks and your bee stand that you got?
Oh man. I mean, to be fair, I've never, used like a bunch of other brands. I mean, I've put hands on, like some Shikars and some Lone Wolf stuff that my brother-in-law and some other guys have. I've never actually used anything other than Hawk Heliums and my old Lone Wolf Assault. But coming from an 11-pound Assault and the Hawks, however, I mean, I cut them down. Then they started selling them like that.
Right.
But coming from that into something like the bee stuff, I mean, it's impressive. It's high quality, and I'm kind of a big guy. And when you look at that stand, you're like, man, it just doesn't look like it would be, that rigid or whatever. But I mean, I can get right out on the end of it, and there is no flex. There's no get, and it bites. Once I get my big self up there, and like when I'm tearing down, I can unstrap. I can take the straps off, and that thing, it's on the tree. I mean, it's still hanging there in the tree because it just bites that.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I remember when you had purchased that, and I've been meaning to ask you what you liked of it, and if you're happy with it. So
It's a legacy legacy item. That's I'll never go back. I mean, I might try to maybe get back into the saddle a little bit just to have another tool in the toolbox, because some of those platforms, you know, they're a little smaller and a little more packable, and I do find myself, you know, sometimes where that's all I need, you know, maybe.
hmm
But honestly, the B stand, it's so light and the sticks are so light that I don't think that you're really I don't think there's a lot of trade-off, you know, versus a saddle, other than maybe you can swing around to one side of the tree, but you can also just get up and turn around
and,
on the
have room on the
stand.
stand. Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. I'm glad you're happy with it, because yeah, that's not a cheap setup. So I same thing, like the Latitude sticks that I bought, the carbon ones. Like I'm pretty happy with them too. They again that equipment is well designed, like Beast Gear or Latitude or some of the other big companies. Like they put a lot of research and development into that stuff. And it's solid stuff for sure. And it just comes down to, I think, just kind of figuring out what you like and kind of what your preferences are. Because like I'm really particular about being able to like be really compact with especially my sticks. Like the heliums, like yeah, they stick together real well, but you get 3 or 4 of them together. That's a big package.
Oh yeah.
Like I know and that's kind of why I was a little like I didn't really like how the speed sticks, stick together. Now, did you end up doing like the bolt system that holds them together?
I did. I utilized their like the threaded rod with the wing nuts,
Yeah.
and so what I did this year, I was running a saddle like a couple years prior to it. I didn't necessarily utilize it as a saddle, like with a bridge and hanging from the tree. I'd still use my tree stand, but I would wear the saddle, and I had like my Male pouches. Well, I went this year. I kind of traded that out, and I got it's actually I think a Tacticon, they call it, like a battle belt.
Okay.
And I got 2 tethered Male pouches. They're like 3 by 9 or 3 by 12 or
Okay.
something like that. And I can get pretty much everything that I need, for a sit in there. Like I've got my extra batteries for my headlamp. I've got skinning knife, like my gloves and just miscellaneous stuff in there. And that's kind of what I'm packing in. And then I just have the stand, and I just take those sticks with the rod, all together, and I just set them on top of the seat. So they're like just outside of the platform, and one bungee cord. And that's pretty much how I'm rocking. I mean, I may have like an outer layer or something, trying not to sweat up
Right.
on my way, in or out. Like in rifle season, you get in the woods and it's like 20 degrees, and then by the time you leave at 10 o'clock in the morning, it's like 50.
Right.
So, but yeah, I'm like to be real streamlined too, and that's one thing I've been working on for the last 4 or 5, however many years, is trying to refine my setups and to make it to where you can basically do it with your eyes closed. And I'm getting out of this packing like I'm going for the weekend, type of stuff, and just taking what I minimalist, like just what I need.
Yeah.
I did get a pack though, like a mystery ranch pack
Oh,
this
really?
year. Yeah, I know that Lee and I have good history with the old Blaine's deer drag sled, but there's some spots that I think if I wound up killing in there, that it would be more prudent to just pack it out. And and for out of state, like I want to do, I was supposed to go to Ohio this year. That just didn't materialize with, with work and, but I'm trying to, if I go out of state somewhere like Ohio and I'm walking in, a couple miles in, like, you're not going to go back to the truck and get a sled. And
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's good. That's a good idea too, because it's handy. Because the one doe I shot down by the lakeshore, like trying to drag that deer out of there, it would have been a nightmare. Like I basically had the two options. Like one, pack it up and go right back to the truck, or put it in the water and walk it down to town
oh God,
and have like my mom or someone pick me up so I can go get my vehicle to load it up from there. But I mean, that would have been like, instead of like a 1.5 mile walk, it would have been like a 5 mile walk. So I was like, yeah, I don't know, man. I wasn't, I wasn't prepared of how heavy that packing a full deer was going to be for me with all the extra gear that I had already brought with me.
yeah.
It ended up being, I mean, it's not that bad. It was a 61-pound pack that I was carrying, but I was like, all right, I did a pack out. I can say I did it, but I don't really want to do that again unless I have to.
Well, yeah. I mean, you think you're not debones. You've got whole quarters and
Yeah.
loins and neck and everything. And then if it's a buck, you'd have the cape and the head and the antlers. So you're looking at, I mean, deboned, a big deer, you can get 80 pounds maybe on a big buck of yield of actual meat, like 70, 80 pounds.
Yeah. Yeah. If it was a big deer, yeah, maybe.
60 at
Yeah.
least,
Yeah,
60. So, that's a
Yeah.
bone in, you're looking at probably over 100 pounds plus I know that pack's like 11 pounds or something, just kind of a bigger pack. And so it's still not.
Yeah. But I will say, though, it was a good experience of, basically butchering the deer in the field and doing it that way. It was a good experience to where if I had to, I'd have the confidence to like, okay, I can do this relatively quickly. And
And there are some states that I understand where you have to do it. You can't move bone.
yeah, I know that. Yeah, because you're either not supposed to, like, either not take them out of the unit or take them out of the county or whatever. Because South Dakota's like that too. You're not. They really don't want you moving the full carcass. So I didn't realize that they were that strict about it, though.
I think it's Kansas maybe. I have a couple of my buddies, they go out, west quite a bit and they hunt Kansas, and it's one of those states out there. I think you have to quarter the deer up and get everything, and then even like the skull cap cleaned out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can move bone, but
Yeah. Yep. But yeah. So overall outlook for this coming season, you positive, optimistic, worried?
well,
What do you think?
you gotta. I mean, you gotta stay positive. I mean, and it's no matter how good or bad of a season that you have. I mean, for me, it's always the same. It's always the same excitement, building up to season. It's definitely more exciting if you have a couple hammers lined up that you're keeping tabs on. But it's I don't think that's ever going to get old for me. You know, it gets to be that time of year, and that, you know, you're like, just look at my YouTube history. Like in the, you know, in the winter, I'm watching like ice fishing stuff, and then, but come like midsummer or something, it's like all the, you know, all the hunting beast content, or you know, you start watching the hunting stuff, and
Yep.
it just gets to, it builds momentum until, you know, finally it arrives. And
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, I know. Like, you get to end the season, especially on a bad season, you're just like, I'm just burned out. Like, I don't even want to think about deer hunting, really. And then all of a sudden, it's like, yeah, I'm going to watch these videos, or, yeah, like you said, or start getting, like, you know, reading content and whatnot. Oh, no, don't tell me. I just realized that we lost the camera. All right, well, we'll have to figure that out in post-production here.
yeah, post-production.
All right. Well, man, I mean, I just realized that we've been going for almost 2 hours now, and I'm not sure what time. Yeah. I don't want to keep you all night, even though I could keep talking to you for hours on end.
I can always come back.
Well, now that you got your first one out of the way, we'll have to get both you and Lee back.
Oh boy.
I wouldn't even have to do any talking then. I'll just sit back and let you guys go.
Yeah, he's definitely coming around. You know, it's interesting to watch his evolution. You know, and honestly, I'll be honest with you, this year, I mean, he had it going on. Like, he was right on the heels. I mean, the guy, and he shot it. He shot a great buck.
Yeah.
But he was like right on their heels. I mean, within minutes, like he'd get pictures sometimes, you know, like the deer came through 20 minutes before he got there or something. And he was like right there. And I wouldn't have been, you know, surprised at all if, you know, if I got the call that he'd to help him drag that big one out, because he was like just so close.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, I feel so bad for him too. He sent me that picture immediately, like, got him, and then he's like, it's not him. Like, oh. Yeah, that was kind of I was kind of bummed, 'cause I know he was a little disappointed that when he walked up on that deer and it wasn't the deer that he thought it was. I mean, it's still a heck of a deer, though.
Oh yeah.
The mass of that rack, like, he didn't have tall tines, but man, like, he even when he handed me the skull for me to do the mount for him, it's like, holy smokes, like, just heavy.
Yeah, that had a great frame on it. I told him, I said, dude, in your situation, my situation, if I haven't filled a tag yet, I'm shooting that deer every time. Every time.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. But yeah, it was funny because when I went scouting with them the one day after we did a drive, and like, it was so funny. We were exactly in the same mindset. Like, every spot that we thought there would be signed, like, we were like, yep, right there. All right, right there. And it was funny to see, like, yeah, he's dialed in.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's kind of I'm glad that we, you know, he's got enough respect for me that I don't have to worry about him, you know, being in my spots, because he's a killer. He's definitely figuring it out.
Yep. But I guess was there anything else that you had?
No, I didn't know how this was going to go, so I just kind of bullet pointed all the stuff that you'd sent over, and had a little my teleprompter, you know, in case I had a Biden moment or something.
Yeah. But all right, man. Well, we'll wrap this up, because, like I said, I don't want to keep you all night long. So, but I appreciate you coming on, and I mean, good golly, you're a wealth of knowledge, man.
Well, I don't know about it. Certainly didn't show last year, but no, I appreciate the invite, and I enjoyed it. I'll, you know, if you ever want to do it again, I'd totally be up for it.
Yeah, most definitely, man. Especially to get you and your cousin here together, and we'll talk strategy and stories, and have a few more beers, and it'll be fun. But we'll wrap this one up. That way you can get home, and then I'll see you next week. So,
Right on.
all right. Well, thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me, Ty. Appreciate it.
All right, so that's it for the conversation with Matt. Matthew, thank you so much for coming on to the show and sharing your experiences and your stories. One of my things I really like about this episode, it shows that even if someone that does have has found significant success and has a track record of success, that things can go wrong for a season where despite how much you think you have figured out, again, things can always go an opposite direction of what you're planning. And it happens for all hunters out there, and it's a lot of just how you kind of get through that process and continue just to drive forward. It is very tough when a season, we all love deer hunting and going after whitetail bucks, but sometimes it just feels like hunting just does not love you back, and it can be a grind sometimes when you have a set goal that you're trying to achieve and you just can't get there. But I think this was a great episode or a great topic to discuss. I hope everyone listening, enjoyed the episode and got a little bit out of it, and able to reflect a little bit on what they do when it comes to a bad season, or things to keep in mind, that things are going to go wrong in the whitetail woods, and it's what you do to get past it is what's kind of more important with that. So, but I'm rambling on some more, so we are going to go ahead and wrap this episode up. So with that, as always, get out there, be safe, and have fun.